Kelly's world fractures the moment the phone rings, a single, urgent summons that drags her from the bright promise of spring into the sterile corridors of St. Sebastian's Medical Center. Moments earlier she was laughing at Steffi's joke in the forward fashion loft, the afternoon light catching the gold strands in her hair and the joy in her eyes. Now she's hunched over the side of a gurney, wrists limp, blood seeping through a torn designer blouse and pooling beneath her like a dark mirror. The paramedics exchange tight glances, their faces masks of professional calm, but Kelly sees it in their eyes. She's in critical condition. Everything else slips away. The whispers from the waiting room, the antiseptic sting of the air, even the girl she doesn't know who's racing down the hallway beside her in a blur of scarlet scrubs. This is the moment when time collapses, every second stretching into an eternity of pain. Across town, Liam stands in his penthouse kitchen, the bottle of rare enzyme inhibitor trembling in his hand as the seconds tick down on Kelly's life. He's just returned from the airport, where he chartered the fastest private jet he could find to bring the drug from Berlin, only to discover that it's been held up by customs red tape, a meaningless bureaucracy that suddenly feels like murder. His phone buzzes with texts from Steffi. "We have to hurry, are you there?" She's unstable. Each message lands like a blow, fueling his panic. He throws open the floor-to-ceiling windows and yells into the humid afternoon air, the city's clamor swallowing his words. He can see the hospital spire in the distance, and he imagines Kelly lying beneath the fluorescent glare, her heartbeat flickering on a monitor that might flatline at any moment. Steffi bursts into the sterile waiting room, face pale but determined, clutching a sheaf of lab reports and a handwritten note from Dr. Bernard, the specialist who devised the experimental protocol for Kelly's condition. He warned that without the compound, an enzyme that only Kelly's mutated DNA responds to, her liver will fail and her heart will give out in less than 24 hours. He also warned that synthesizing the drug domestically would take months. They have hours. Hours to save a life. Liam scrambles after her, the vial clinking like a countdown clock in his jacket pocket. They exchange a look that says everything. Fear, resolve, guilt. Neither wants to admit how responsible they feel. Kelly trusted them to keep her safe. While Liam fights paperwork and international shipping agents by phone, Steffi confronts a different threat. In the grand hall of Forrester Creations, a shadowy figure in a tailored suit slips Kelly's dossier onto Marcus's desk, a photocopy of what looks like a birth certificate, smudged and faded, bearing the name of a local clinic in Fullerton and a footnote stamped illegitimate. "She's not a Fullerton," the messenger whispers, voice low. "She's a nobody. Her real parents slipped out of town years ago. You can challenge your guardianship." The insinuation radiates poison. If Kelly isn't Chris and Sally's biological child, their claims over her estate and her very future could be voided. In the conservative world of probate law, blood matters. Steffi rips the paper to pieces and shoves them into her purse, but the seed of doubt has been planted. She knows that once Marcus gets wind of it, the judge might order a DNA test, dragging Kelly's fragile body into a courtroom before she's even conscious. Back at the hospital, Kelly hovers between consciousness and the void. She flashes back to the crash itself, the screech of tires, a blur of headlights, the moment she realized the steering column wouldn't budge. It wasn't an accident. Someone had rigged her car. An elaborate tampering of brake lines and electrical wiring designed to look like a freak mechanical failure. She remembers a shadow slipping away into the night before the impact. Fear threads through her memory. Someone wanted her dead. But who? And why? Liam bursts into the ER just as nurses wheel Kelly's gurney into a trauma bay. He clutches the vial like a lifeline, shouting her name. A resident, Dr. Chavez meets him at the door with a stern look. That medication is untested, she warns. Even if it's the correct compound, it could trigger a catastrophic reaction. Liam's voice cracks. She has no other choice. He thrusts the vial into the nurse's hands, then collapses into a chair, head in his hands. Steffi slips beside him, places a steadying hand on his shoulder. They wait in a silence that roars louder than any scream. Inside the trauma bay, Kelly's body is a battlefield. Tubes snake in and out of her arms. Her heart monitors beep in uneven rhythms. The lead surgeon, Dr. Patel, prepares the infusion. He cleans the foreport with the antiseptic swab, turns to the resident, and nods. Let's hope this does the trick. The vial cracks as the solution enters Kelly's vein. Liam stands at the observation window, pressed against the glass. His breath clouds the surface, as if he's trying to reach through it. Steffi wraps her arms around him. They draw strength from each other, two halves of the same desperate prayer. Meanwhile, in a sleek office suite downtown, the mastermind behind the sabotage watches the clock. A woman in a sharp blazer scrolls through gossip sites on her tablet, smiling at the headlines. Kelly Fullerton's car crash. Mechanical failure? New twist. Could there be more to the story? Next, she opens a shadow account on social media, posts the smudged photocopy of the birth record with a question. If Kelly isn't a Fullerton, does she deserve their fortune? She reclines in her chair and sips her champagne, savoring the chaos unfolding. No one will suspect her connection to the crash by the time her name surfaces. Kelly will be gone, and the family torn apart by mistrust. Back at St. Sebastian's, Dr. Patel frowns at the monitor. The beeps regather into a steadier pattern. Kelly's oxygen saturation climbs minutely. Outside, a tense hush falls over the onlookers in the corridor. Liam and Steffi exchange a long-awaited glance. Relief and terror mingling. She's holding on, the surgeon announces, voice low. We need to keep her stable for 72 hours, then reassess. Liam sinks to his knees, lower leg collapsing beneath him, and Steffi supports him, tears streaming down her cheeks. They've won the first battle, but the war is far from over. Within hours, Kelly's levels even out. Nurses rotate shifts around her bed, and Dr. Chavez visits Liam and Steffi privately. The drug is working, she confirms. But her liver is fragile. We need full transparency about any underlying conditions. Steffi hands over Kelly's medical history, everything from her congenital enzyme deficiency to allergies that rule out countless alternatives. As the doctor nods and departs, Steffi turns to Liam with a determined look. First we save her life, then we save her name. Liam nods, wiping his eyes. He pulls out his phone and dials Marcus. I need everything on that so-called birth certificate, he says, voice hard. Late that night, in the pale glow of the ICU hallway, Steffi stands outside Kelly's room, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Liam emerges from the bathroom, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. He hands one to her. They lean against the wall, shoulder to shoulder, watching the steady pulse of Kelly's monitor through the glass. Who would do this to her? Steffi whispers. Liam shakes his head. Someone with access. Someone who knew her schedule, her car keys. Someone who wanted to destroy her life. He closes his eyes. And now they're trying to destroy her legacy. They sit in silence, the only sound the soft beeping and the hum of machines. Down the corridor, behind closed doors at Forrester Creations, a confrontation has already begun. Marcus stands at the head of a long mahogany table, the shredded photocopies of Kelly's records in his hand. Brooke and Ridge flank him, shock and anger etched in their faces. This is a lie, Brooke insists. We adopted Kelly. We love her as our own. Ridge paces, fists clenched. If someone's behind this, we'll find out who. Marcus rubs his temples. First we prove Kelly's lineage beyond doubt. I'm ordering a private DNA test tomorrow. Ridge looks at Brooke and sighs. We can't keep her in limbo. Not when she's fighting for her life. Brooke's voice trembles. Let's hope this test comes back fast. Before whoever set up that crash tries something worse. By dawn, Liam has already tracked the photocopy to a disreputable notary in Fullerton whose office has been closed for months. He sends for a legitimate birth certificate search, bypassing official channels with his father's contacts. Steffi secures Dr. Bernard's cooperation to testify about Kelly's rare condition, establishing a record that ties her uniquely to the Fullerton lineage by medical predisposition. In the sterile hush of early morning, they prepare for the next onslaught, the guardianship hearing that will decide Kelly's fate as much as her body does. And so, as the city wakes to the threat of a storm, two battles rage on parallel tracks, one for Kelly's life, fought with drug vials and midnight prayers, the other for her name, fought with legal affidavits and the shreds of a forged past. Neither Liam nor Steffi can rest until both are won. Kelly, trapped between unconsciousness and hope, lies unaware of the war being waged to save her. The future is uncertain, but they will not yield. In the dim light of dawn, they make a silent vow. They will expose the saboteur, crush the lies, and bring Kelly back to them whole, in health and in honor. Just as Ridge Forrester believed he had finally closed the chapter on his tumultuous love story with Taylor Hayes, the unthinkable happened. Nick Marone, his half-brother and longtime rival, strode through the doors of Forrester Creations as if he owned the place, his presence electrifying the very air and threatening to upend the fragile peace Ridge thought he'd secured. The moment Ridge stepped off the elevator into the grand, light-filled atrium, he spotted Nick and Brooke Logan standing close enough that their shoulders brushed, the scent of Nick's cologne mingling with the soft fragrance of Brooke's perfume. Ridge's heart lurched. He slowed in his tracks, forcing himself to inhale steadily, to play it cool, but his pulse pounded like a war drum in his ears. Nick and Brooke were talking in low murmurs, but Ridge could see the gleam in Nick's eyes, something triumphant, perhaps even predatory. And Brooke. Brooke's lips curved into a smile that was just a shade too knowing, her usual warmth tempered by a hint of mischief. Then Ridge saw it. The quick, electrifying brush of Nick's hand against Brooke's elbow, the way Nick leaned in and whispered something that made Brooke's eyes sparkle, and at that instant, Ridge realized with a jolt that Nick had just kissed her. The look on Ridge's face registered pure shock before it morphed into something darker, jealousy wrapped in righteous fury. Ridge's jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his cheek throbbed. He wanted to storm forward, to yank Brooke away and challenge Nick to a duel, but instead he remained rooted to the spot, his hands buried in his pockets, knuckles white. Nick glanced up as if he sensed Ridge's gaze, and with a slow, self-satisfied grin he turned and said, "We were just talking about you, brother," as though Ridge were the missing piece in their conversation, and not the wounded party. Brooke glanced at Ridge and offered a half-smile, one eyebrow raised in playful invitation or perhaps challenge, and Ridge felt a stab of panic, that familiar fear of being undermined. Of having the woman he loved seduced by someone who viewed her as a prize to win rather than a partner to cherish. Rage welled inside him, yet he forced a calm facade, stepping forward into the circle of light between them. "Talking about me?" he asked, voice deceptively even, but the underlying accusation was plain. "Yes," Nick said, folding his arms across his chest. "We were discussing how you've treated Brooke over the years. You know, the endless cycle of picking between Taylor and her, the abrupt emotional shifts." Nick's tone was mocking but also surprisingly earnest, as if he'd been cataloging Ridge's missteps for years. He tilted his head, his dark eyes gleaming. "You've made her feel like Plan B more times than I can count." Ridge felt a hot spike of defensiveness. How dare Nick accuse him of anything after everything he'd been through? Yet Nick's words weren't without merit. Ridge had, indeed, wavered between Taylor and Brooke, torn between two women he loved fiercely, but who had equally broken his heart in different ways. Now Nick was standing there as the stable alternative, the man who professed unwavering devotion and no mind games, and Ridge felt the raw sting of inadequacy seep in. Brooke watched the exchange with a curious, amused expression, as though she were savoring the spectacle of two brothers vying for her attention. She reached out and touched Ridge's arm, a gesture meant to soothe, perhaps, but to Ridge it felt like an entanglement that only underscored his indecision. Immediately, Taylor's face flashed through Ridge's mind, her soft smile, the way she looked at him with steadfast loyalty. He glanced toward Taylor, imagining her somewhere nearby, unaware of this betrayal unfolding. A pang of guilt struck him. He had chosen Taylor, he thought, committed to her, but now the idea that Brooke might slip into Nick's arms stung worse than any wound. In that moment, Ridge knew jealousy was a luxury he couldn't afford, and yet he couldn't help himself. His voice trembled slightly as he met Nick's gaze. "You think you can just walk in here and do what I never could?" he challenged, the words sharper than he intended. Nick's grin widened. "I know I can," he said with quiet confidence. "Brooke deserves more than a man who can't make up his mind. She deserves someone who will stand by her no matter what." Ridge's breath caught. He opened his mouth to respond, but Brooke spoke first, her tone light but carrying an undercurrent of something raw and charged. "You know, Ridge, maybe Nick has a point. Maybe I do deserve a little stability for once." The words cut through Ridge like a knife. He saw his own reflection in the polished marble floor, tall, strong, but wavering under the weight of doubt and fear. His rivalry with Nick had always been intense. First over designing Forrester Creations collections, then over his daughters, and now over the heart of the woman he claimed to love. The stakes had never been higher. Ridge forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Stability," he echoed. "You think stability is better than passion? Than the history we share, the way we've built a life together?" Brooke's expression softened, but the challenge was clear. Ridge would have to fight for her. Meanwhile, Nick lingered close, an unwavering sentinel guarding Brooke's side. Ridge glanced around, noticing the heads of assistants peeking around corners, their phones out, already tweeting rumors of the confrontation. The office buzzed with electricity, everyone sensing that this moment would become legend. Ridge swallowed hard, then turned his focus entirely to Brooke. "If you want stability," he said, voice low, "maybe you should ask yourself what price you pay for it." He saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Ridge had always known Brooke to be decisive, but this time she seemed torn. Taylor's voice echoed in his memory, "Trust in us, Ridge." And yet, Brooke's gaze met his with a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. Maybe Nick was right. Maybe Ridge's own fears had sabotaged their love too many times. He squared his shoulders. "I love you, Brooke," he said, each word weighted with the history of their 8 marriages, the countless times they'd torn each other apart only to find their way back together. "But if you think someone else can give you what I can't," here he gestured between Brooke and Nick, "then maybe I'll leave you be." The threat hung in the air, both bold and desperate. Brooke's breath hitched. Ridge expected her to run into Nick's arms, to tell him she was through with Ridge's emotional roller coaster. But instead, she placed a hand on Ridge's chest, right over his heart, and looked into his eyes with a fierce intensity that made his own heart quake. "I don't want to be a prize you fight over," she said, voice trembling yet resolute. "I want to be someone you choose every single day." The declaration struck like thunder. Nick stepped back, momentarily disarmed. Ridge felt a surge of hope, the spark of the old magic that had bound them together through so many storms. At that instant, Taylor emerged from the hallway. Having sensed the tension, she came to find Ridge, her gaze darting between Ridge and Brooke. She saw Ridge's vulnerable expression and the way Brooke's hand rested on his chest, and something in her heart clenched. Taylor's loyalty warred with the guilt of being the cause of this family upheaval. Nick seized the moment, his eyes cold and calculating as he addressed both women. When one of you wants certainty and the other wants the world on fire, it's only a matter of time before hearts are broken. Ridge suddenly felt the full weight of Nick's words, the underlying accusation that Ridge had never been enough, never solid ground on which Brooke could build an unshakable foundation. Rage and heartbreak collided into a knot in Ridge's throat. But rather than lash out, Ridge took Brooke's hand in his, lifting it to his lips in a kiss that was at once tender and possessive. He held her gaze, unblinking. "I choose you," he said, voice soft but unwavering. Then he turned to Nick. "And I choose Taylor." Nick's jaw tightened as Ridge's words echoed around the marble atrium. Ridge turned back to Brooke, his heart pounding. Brooke's eyes shimmered with tears not of sorrow, but of relief and fierce clarity. She stepped closer to Ridge, leaning into his embrace. Taylor approached and placed a gentle hand on Ridge's shoulder, offering her own silent support. Nick, realizing the moment had slipped through his grasp, allowed a cold smile to cross his lips. "Congratulations on your happy ending," he said with deliberate emphasis. "I'll see you both at the next guardianship hearing." The words landed like a grenade. Ridge's blood ran cold. He had almost forgotten about the looming threat of legal challenges, the forged birth records, the shadowy saboteur pulling all the strings. The fight for Brooke's heart had just intersected with a battle for her very identity and guardianship. As Ridge and Brooke exchanged a glance heavy with unspoken promises and fears, Taylor slipped her arm through Ridge's, forming a united front against the storm gathering on the horizon. Nick turned on his heel and strode away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, leaving behind a tension so thick it felt like it might suffocate them all. Brooke pressed closer to Ridge. "We'll face whatever comes," she whispered. "Together." Ridge nodded, kissing the top of her head. Taylor stood by his side, resolute. The three of them, in love, in loyalty, in conflict, stood at the precipice of a new era. One defined by fierce rivalries, fragile alliances, and the timeless question of where Brooke's heart would truly rest. And as the sun streamed through the grand windows of Forrester Creations, casting long shadows that intertwined and danced, it was clear that the saga was far from over. The bold and the beautiful had delivered yet another seismic jolt to the lives of its protagonists, and in the world of endless twists and betrayals, one thing was certain. No matter who won this war for Brooke Logan, no one would ever be